Hello. I want to thank Lodi Liberal, Professor Bernardini, and all of you, really, for this great honor. I'm glad you're celebrating my book, The Economics of Prohibition, and its translation. This is a book that was published over 30 years ago and is now still in print. And it's a book that's fortunately had some impact and has changed the public discourse. And I think that this book does play an important role in the battle of ideas between prohibitions that display the power of the state. Prohibition is really, in my experience, really the symbol of the sword of the state, where the police show up with armored vehicles and weapons and make arrests and do confiscations. So it's really one of the most visible modern symbols of the power of the state. And then we contrast that with the free market economy, which provides for our wants and our needs in a very free and open way. And so it really draws a stark division between those two institutions in our society, prohibition and the power of the state versus the free market and our wants and our needs, and our growth as humans, and our enjoyment and our fulfillment. And so there's several sub-issues, really, with respect to prohibition that are particularly relevant today. Is prohibition in the public interest? Well, we were certainly sold that story that it would help society in many, many different ways. But we have come to find out, and it's in the book initially, but we've learned a lot more since then, that it's really not in the public interest, that it's really in the private interest of certain individuals, the power of the state and certain institutions, and that it doesn't and never was intended really to promote the public interest unless you define the public interest as government in the state. The second thing that I started in this book, but others have built on enormously, is whether or not prohibition of things like alcohol and illegal drugs is a matter of science or if it's a matter of propaganda. And what I found and what others have found since then, and even well before then, is that prohibition is not a matter of science, that it is indeed a matter of propaganda. I know from American history that when people from Italy, from the various regions of Italy, started emigrating to the United States roughly a century ago in large numbers, that alcohol prohibition was used as a way of keeping down this new Italian population of Catholics who would dare to drink alcohol on Sunday afternoons with their families. How awful could that possibly be? And in reality, how normal and wonderful is that? And that's what another thing that the book argued against, that we were being fed back in the 1920s and 30s here, as well as today, a great deal of propaganda that never really held up to science. One of those elements was crime creation, that alcohol and drugs were thought to be the creation of crime, that it wasn't of the human mind, it wasn't of the human condition, but rather it was of a substance that people consumed that led them to lives of crime. And of course, what we found is that prohibition does not suppress crime in the slightest, but prohibition creates crime, everything from addicts and their petty crimes on up to organized crime, where you have a powerful organization that is involved in criminal activities. And so really, it's not prohibition that's meant to curb crime or suppress crime, but to actually, it's the biggest creation of crime and of all the negative consequences of crime. And basically, things like large prison populations, as well as violence in our city streets. And related to crime, and certainly organized crime, is corruption. That the original proponents of prohibition said that if we get rid of alcohol, if we get rid of illegal drugs and other things, that the corruption that government ordinarily, almost of its nature, experiences, corruption by bureaucrats, corruption of politicians, all of that would go away. And actually, of course, we now well know, with hundreds of books and hundreds of novels and hundreds of studies, that it's really the illegal drugs, the illegal alcohol and other things that really spawn corruption. It provides the ingredient of corruption, which is money, basically, that people working in the underground economy pay politicians, they pay the police, prosecutors, bureaucrats, and so forth to make their life easier in dealing illegally prohibited products. And so another thing that the book makes clear, and is very important, is the whole idea of that I started with was the marketplace versus prohibition and black markets. And if we look at how prohibition does not control any of these things and spawns all sorts of bad ideas and social problems that I've mentioned already, and that the market has ways of curbing, the behavior of individuals, the behavior of criminals, the behavior of institutions. Nothing is perfect, but which type of arrangement is best for the human condition and human betterment and human fulfillment? Well, it's clearly the marketplace. So we can eliminate the nirvana option where everything can be solved instantaneously. We know that in the human condition that we're going to come upon new problems and new situations. And what institutional framework are we looking for and hoping for to help us through all those transitions? And clearly, it's the marketplace that does a much better job, and prohibitions tend to just simply get in the way and make things worse. So we have made a great deal of progress, and I am very optimistic about the way the world is headed because we increasingly know that government is not about the public interest, but about their own private interests, that the government approach is not about science. It's more about propaganda. And of course, we've seen this in COVID, where science has been put forth as our great savior, but only after the fact have we learned that the science is far from being settled, that the government's approach is far from being deemed excellent, and that they've been using a lot of propaganda to gain more power and control over us. and of course the crime and the corruption and the deadly drugs that their prohibitions are foisting upon people around the world, this is all much more evident to people around the world. And so that's why I'm so optimistic that these policies will be forced to change and to improve, because we've become more informed, we've become more intelligent, we've become better educated as a result of all of these failures in the war on drugs, not to make improvements, but to actually make things worse. And so we're going to continue to work on this. We're going to continue to write on this topic, and we're going to continue to win against the state, and we are going to defeat their prohibition, their war on drugs. And I thank you again for this event, and I hope to enlist you in this great battle against the state. Thank you very much.